Hello and welcome to the Voices of Bandera podcast, our newest news segment for the community. Each episode dives into the ideas, experiences, and voices shaping Bandera today. So whether you're a longtime local or just discovering the area, this is where Bandera speaks. If you know someone that wishes to speak about an important event or issue in the city, please message me at veronica.rector@banderabulletin.com. We want the community to be involved in our podcast as much as possible, and we want to provide a platform for your voice. Today, we have a special, and I might add, first guest, Ken Good, who sits on the board of directors for the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. Ken is going to be sharing his expertise with us about the new no cash bail legislation that was signed by Governor Greg Abbott and approved by 61% of Texas voters. So, Ken, can you talk about the new cash bail, what it means, and why voters overwhelmingly supported stronger judicial authority to deny bail in violent cases?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here. I think that what's going on in Texas is a sign of what's going on across the country. It's kind of we're having a backlash to these soft on crime policies that have been going on, especially in our urban areas. And as crime has increased, and we've been promised over and over that it's not because of these policies, even though we know they are, when you're soft on crime, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime. Suddenly, we're looking for ways to address that. Instead of just going back to what we used to always do, what we know works, we're kind of overshooting a little bit, and we're giving courts more authority to just hold people until trial. And so Texas started that with some very violent offenses and gave the burden to the district attorney to file a motion to detain somebody. And then if they meet their evidentiary requirements, the court has no discretion, but it has to hold somebody until trial. It only applies in a few instances. Where it becomes a problem is when we are expanding that list, because just like when the policies go far to the left, the public's not going to stand for that because crime's going to increase and we want to all be safe. But when the policies go too far to the right, the public is not going to be willing to also pay to hold everybody before trial. So we need to find that happy medium, which is, really just falling back and relying upon the private surety bail system even more, and then overlaying on top of that accountability. We'll give you a chance, but if you screw up, then we're going to hold you in jail.
And I think that's kind of why Texas voters did vote for this, as they were really tired of, people being able to get out. There was concerns about safety. So, I mean, is there a real life case that you can reference, for example, that?
Well, I think there's been 2 reported cases in the news since the policy's been enacted. So it went before the voters in November, and it passed by 60-something%, which, I mean, that sounds like a lot, but I think past proposed constitutional amendments in Texas on bail have passed by 80-something%. So I would say it didn't have as much support, although it still had it passed easily. But I mean, the first example is a case of alleged murder and a high school student. And we've had examples in Harris County where, during COVID, there were people that were being released for murder charges on a personal bond, which is simple release of a free bond. And so, for a while I was arguing in Harris County that you got one free murder, just like you got one free bite as a dog before you were dangerous. And so that example that we're pointing to came from Harris County. So the new policy was enacted by the public, or I guess the legislature passed it, the voters approved it, and then it was a court in Harris County that followed it. So it's a really good sign that, in the fight between Harris County, Houston, Texas, and the legislature over who sets bail policy in the state, it's obviously the legislature that does that, and not the commissioner's court in Houston, Texas, or Harris County.
So how does the new Texas law differ from the no cash bail systems that like other states have?
Well, I mean, the system that Texas has adopted is to strengthen the criminal justice system, not to weaken it. So the no cash bail policies, like in our inner cities, is based upon the premise that we're going to treat everybody just exactly the same. So if you're charged with theft and I'm charged with theft, the concept is we're going to treat you both the same. And the result is, if it's on our list of you don't get a choice, judge, you have to release somebody on simple release, no matter what it's called, a personal bond in Texas, no no bond in New York, or a zero bond in California. They're all the same thing. You get released on your promise to come back. But the problem is, what if you're a first time offender, but I've been doing this forever and I have 10-page criminal history. I mean, under the old system, judges had the discretion to treat each of us differently, and we want a career criminal to be treated differently than a first-time offender. But these soft on crime policies treat everybody the same. It's a charge-based release system.
Right.
So everybody that gets charged with the same thing get treated the same way, and that's I mean, it's really doing the opposite. There's an old study from the Department of Justice that says what is an element that a lot of career criminals share, and it's getting caught on a low-level offense early on where they feel like they got away with it.
Yes. Yeah, that's
No
very true. Yes. So the early rulings, they suggest that there's public confidence in bail reforms. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So Texas has gone through several rounds of bail reform, again, going the opposite direction of the rest of our urban areas. So they have strengthened bail, not weakened it. And I think that there's a couple things they've done. The first thing they did was they required judges to review criminal histories in setting bail, going back to the people that don't have a criminal history and the people that do have a criminal history. First-time offender versus somebody that's been doing it for years. What is the best indicator of whether somebody's going to do something in the future? It's whether they've done something in the past. There's a reason why our soft on crime urban areas are tying the hands of judges on that issue, is because they just want to save money. They want to release people from jail, and they keep saying it's not going to make us more dangerous, or it's not going to increase crime. But yes, it does. Absolutely does. So this is all about, cutting the funding and trying to spend it more on social programs instead of looking for strengthening the criminal justice or holding somebody accountable. I mean, look at Proposition 47 in California, where they, the public voted to support changing certain felonies to misdemeanors. And, the thought was, well, they'll still have to, they'll have to answer for their crimes, but then they'll be able to get jobs. But the problem after that was, in our urban areas, they decided not to prosecute some of those crimes. The most important one, theft under $950. Suddenly stores were having $25,000 a day in shoplifting. They couldn't stand that much shoplifting. I mean, there's no business model that will withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting. Stores begin to close. Crime in the surrounding area goes up dramatically. I mean, the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building in San Francisco told people to work from home. It wasn't safe to just be in the area around the building. And then finally, you see the ramifications from that. You see commercial property values just drop like a stone. And so they start selling for 50 to 30% of their value from just 5 years before. So Texas rejected that and said, we're going to require judges to review the criminal histories before setting bail. And, that just sounds like common sense. I mean, we should look at your criminal history before setting bail. And, the problem with Texas is it didn't have a database system for judges to be able to do that. So they had to set up a central database so that it could issue a report so the judges could see what the criminal history was for a defendant. And they did that. And they've set up a lot more conditions, but probably the second most important reform they did was limiting the simple release mechanisms, especially for violent offenses.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I mean, the worst example I can think of is someone that was in jail in Houston, Texas on a misdemeanor. And so he failed to show up for court 17 times. and they just kept giving him the same bond over and over and over. Now, I'm sorry, but if you don't show up 17 times for a court case, then you're not going to come. And
Yeah.
so why would you continue to give that person a personal bond?
That's true. And it's interesting because right now a hot topic is like the death of small town America. Small businesses are closing left and right. And of course, big corporations, they have a part to play in this, absolutely. But it's what you mentioned earlier. It's like if you don't prosecute what is considered smaller crimes, I mean, that does affect these small businesses. And that can also lead to why these places are shutting down, because these crimes are not getting prosecuted. And then the commercial value, like you said, it goes down. And suddenly what used to be a popular area to go shopping, it's not there anymore.
And
It's an interesting way to look at it.
Yes, and it becomes a drug hangout. I mean, look, I grew up in small town America. I grew up in a town of 1,258 or 1,264, depending on which decade you looked at the census. And I mean, I'm all about small town cities. I know everybody knows everybody. I mean,
Yes.
when I was growing up, my mom brought me into the living room and says, "I've got a call from a neighbor saying you were fishtailing," and I'm like, "No, I wasn't. I absolutely was not. I deny. I would never fishtail." And she's like, "Do you even know what that is?" And I'm like, "No, but I did not do it." And so, I mean, in a small town, everybody's in everybody's business, and there's good things about it, but there's also, there's bad things about it. But the good is everybody's watching out for each other. And,
Yeah.
when you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, somebody's usually calling you on that. We don't have people calling us on, when we're doing something we shouldn't be doing. I have some good friends that are good accountability partners. If I say something that's out of the norm for me that maybe shouldn't be coming out of a Christian's mouth, they'll call me on it.
Right.
And I like that. We need more of that. I mean, that's kind of the whole sense of families that we've lost in our urban areas. We had the failure of families, the failures of schools, and the failure of fighting drugs in our urban cities, and they can't find jobs. And so now we're going to fix it all by being soft on crime in our urban areas.
See, and it's not like I'm not sympathetic towards people who have made mistakes in the past. And of course, I want you to get a job and everything, but it seems like it's like hiding from the truth a little bit. If you weren't prosecuted for these smaller crimes, you go apply somewhere, and they had no idea about your history because you were never prosecuted for that. And
well, but then we pass statutes where we can't ask them about their criminal history. I mean, but the problem is, can you imagine what would happen today if, a company hired you to work for them, and you have this long criminal history, and you start hurting, customers? I mean, I don't know how that company would not have liability for that. But, we've got a government that, is all about politics. And so there are people in the politics that want to push that,
yes.
We can't ask those types of questions. And, where I see it a lot is they won't release immigration status. So bondsmen will release people from jail, and then they get deported, and they want the bondsman to pay the full amount of the bond. It's like, look, if you don't want us to post a bond for somebody who's here illegally, then tell us if they're here illegally when we ask. But y'all,
Right.
You've got some statutes that preclude you from answering those questions. And, they lied to us and said they were here legally, or they had a green card. And, so we can only do so much. And so, if you're not going to prosecute them after they're deported, then why are you trying to hold us accountable for 100% of the bond when you're the one that has that information? You're the best source for that information.
I think things have gotten so political too. What things should be considered common sense things have become like, that's either a left idea or a right idea, but instead there's no more meeting of the middle anymore. And I'm kind of glad that Texas went in this route for the, but at the same time, it's like, what did it take for us to get there?
Well, but I would say we're committing the same mistakes that we made in the 60s. In the 60s, we felt safe. And so we started being more forgiving on our criminal laws. And then crime started going up, and we had a disagreement between the two national parties on how to fight crime. And so there was a backlash. And so as a result, Reagan was elected. And when Reagan was elected, one of his policies was the war on drugs. I would say we've just been through that exact same thing with Trump. I would say the backlash would have happened 2 years earlier, but for the Supreme Court's ruling on abortion, which had its own backlash, which overcame the crime issue. But I think Trump 2.0 was a result of immigration policies and crime.
going on.
And we're learning as we go forward, they're so intertwined. I mean, the overlap between the immigration policies and other countries sending their criminals to our country, and then the soft on crime policies have just accentuated it, made it worse. And so I think we're in the middle of that backlash like we had in the 60s. The problem that we have now is everything is so political. I'm thinking we need one more national election where it's about crime. And when that happens, then suddenly both parties will revert to their, history of being law and order parties. And so we've got one party that still needs to reset, and they're rolling the dice really big on this midterm election. But we'll see. I mean, history would say they'll win the midterm election, but Trump has always been, undervalued. And so we'll see. I mean, history would say they do, but you never count Trump out. And even if they do overcome it and they take over the House, that's probably one of the reasons why the last 2 years of her presidency usually focuses on, foreign policy. So we'll see. I think Trump is a lot smarter than anybody in Congress right now, and I think he's running circles around them. But there's a lot of people with Trump derangement syndrome that would say I'm absolutely crazy for saying that. And every Republican candidate going forward running for president, we're going to hear he's worse than Trump. If we elect him, he's worse than Trump, because that's the new where we are politically.
It's true. One of the other questions I had was, do you think there's going to be other states that are going to follow our example, or are we leading the way, you think, in this, or no?
We had that situation of Irina Arutsala, I can't pronounce her name, but the girl in the who was stabbed on video.
Yes.
And that legislature reacted very quickly and strengthened their bail laws. And so I think if you look at New York, which enacted really bad soft on crime policies, they've rolled it back 3 times. And it's still one of the major issues this year in the governor's election. So I would say we're seeing soft on crime policies being rolled back across the country, and soft on crime DAs. The Soros DAs have a very short shelf life. They're lasting 1 or 2 elections. And after that, they're getting replaced by law and order candidates. So
I didn't know that. Wow.
But the problem is we're still getting attacked. I mean, you look at the state of Washington, they're looking at doing bail reform through the Supreme Court rules. So they don't have to face the voters. They're just doing it behind everybody's backs. And so we still have stuff like that happening.
Yeah.
We're still going to see that fight for a while, but you're seeing such a disparity between blue and red states that it's going to get to the point where it can't be denied anymore. You're seeing it every day in reports now regarding the economies of the red states and the blue states because of the tax policies. So they're trying to overcome their bad policies by just increasing the taxes so they'll still have the same revenue. But it's now reaching the point where it's chasing the high income citizens out of the states. And so that's, to me, a red line. And when you cross that, it's going to start biting you in the tush a little bit. And I think that's what's happening. And so I think it's going to get worse, and the disparity between the right and the left is going to get worse and worse. And at some point, the citizens of the blue states are going to say, maybe it is the politics that's causing this.
So if you were to draft something like just akin legislation in addition to what's going on, what would that entail? What are your suggestions?
Well, I think I like what Texas has done. So I would require that judges have to review criminal histories in setting bail. Right. I like what Texas has done. I would limit the use of personal bonds or simple release, however your state calls it, for violent offenses. But I would also say if you have a failure to appear, you don't get one a second time. I mean, you only get you get out of jail free card once, and if you fail to show up, then that was your one opportunity. We're seeing a lot of discussion across the country now on whether a failure to appear was willful or whether it was stupid. Yeah. And the activists are saying, well, only the willful failures to appear should be held against them. And that's just an emotional argument because both do this exact same damage to the criminal justice system. If you don't show up, your case gets put on hold, can't go forward till you come back. And the whole willful thing is you can't make a defendant say, I willfully failed to appear for court.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you do, then you can be prosecuted for bail jumping. So what are the chances that anyone's going to admit that they willfully failed to appear? None, zero. And what are the chances that a judge can make them say? Zero, none. So this is once again a political fight to make it seem like we need to focus, when really what it does is it tied the hands of judges. So, well, you can't determine whether the failure to appear was willful. So since you can't determine whether it was willful, you can't hold it against them. Well, that's the same policies that we're seeing on these soft on crime. Let's tie the hands of the judges so they can't do anything. And what does that do? It increases crime.
Yeah, and it's interesting because how much time would it take for them to determine whether or not it was willful or not? I mean, that's kind of a waste
It would
of
take
time.
a whole yeah,
Yeah.
it is a waste of time because it would take a lot of time and a lot of discovery and calling third-party witnesses for you to determine whether it was willful. And really they're just setting up procedures or systems so that you can't. And so I always love to say, well, you're holding the bondsman accountable for the failure to appear, whether it was willful or not willful. And so if you're going to hold the defendant liable only if it's willful, well, then you should hold, but that's just bad policy. That's a policy built to cripple the criminal justice system. So that's not a good policy. And we should just see that for that fact and move on.
So how do you predict this is going to impact crime in the next few years?
Well, I think what we've discovered in the last few weeks is when we start removing criminals who are here illegally, that has a big impact on crime because it removes the criminal element, but also the people that are watching. We have a small group of people that are committing a large number of the crimes in our community. And it's kind of referred to as the city within the city, the criminals living within the city. But we have a large gray area between the two cities where every day people are saying, am I going to be in the law and order city or am I going to be in the crime city? And they're making that decision based on consequences, on accountability. That's one of the things that I think any system for crime or pretrial release it's had to have a strong element of accountability. And so I think I think that's very much needed. And I think that's one of the things that's very lacking in our criminal justice system today.
That was well said. That was my last question, but is there any final thoughts that you kind of want to leave us with? Anything to think about, maybe upcoming legislations that you would suggest taking a look at?
Well, I think Washington is an important state to look at right now because I think what they're doing at their Supreme Court is we've seen in the past, but we haven't seen it in several years. So it's using their playbook from the past, and it looks like it may work. We'll see. But if I would talk to those judges, I would say you're being asked to take your criminal justice system and take it and tie the hands of the judges. And you're being told the exact opposite. Oh, the judges' hands are not going to be tied. They're going to be able to hold people accountable. We're just going to give them a first chance. No, you're not. You're making it where judges cannot hold people accountable. What you're really saying is judges are not doing their job currently. And so you're going to tell them how to do their job. But the systems that you're setting up, you're listening to activists. And the activists are never going to admit to you that what they're doing is not working or what they're proposing is not working. And there's a really good example of that. There was an article in the Dallas Morning News, and it was talking to an activist law firm, and they had the audacity to say, every trial court across the country that has looked at our arguments has held the private surety bail system unconstitutional. That was a true statement. But what they left out was every time it was appealed to the courts of appeals, they were reversed and their arguments were found to be not applicable. And so I got so mad, I wrote a letter to the editor and I said, this is the part they left out. And not only have they been reversed, here's this case, here's this case, here's this case. So they continue to make the same arguments, and they don't point out that our arguments have been held improper, that are been rejected by these courts of appeals, and they continue to make the same arguments. And why do they do that? Because they're raising money off of it, so they can file their next lawsuit. And so they've now sold a bill of goods to the Washington Supreme Court. And if they're successful, it's going to set back criminal justice reform in that state. It's going to set it back a decade, and it may take that long to straighten it out, and we'll see. So hopefully they'll find out when 300 something people respond saying this is bad, and only 30 something say it's a good thing. Hopefully they'll realize what's going on when they've been led astray down the rabbit trail by the activists, and not what's in the best interests of their state.
And Ken, I should have asked this at the beginning, but can you talk about your professional background, how many years you've been?
Sure. Well, I'm really old. I'm like 65. I've been doing this for over 35 years now. I graduated from law school in 1989. I went into private practice. My wife is also an attorney, but I didn't meet her for a few years after I've been practicing law. She's a staff attorney for a federal magistrate judge. I've always been in private practice. I learned how to practice law, or was trained by an attorney who is really, really good, very gifted. We had a trial team that represented doctors and hospitals when they were sued. We were pretty much undefeated. We were on court TV. I wouldn't say pretty much, we were undefeated. We were on court TV. We swore we were going to lose, and we won. I argued my first case at the Supreme Court of Texas as a 4-year lawyer. You have to be practicing for 5 years to be board certified. So I got to argue my first case really early. I met with my client in Austin to prepare the day before the argument. And he looked at me and he said, "You are not arguing my case tomorrow. You are too young." And I've always looked younger than my age, and it's always been something I've always hated. But I looked at him, I'm like, well, you got a tough problem, because I'm the only one prepared to argue your case tomorrow. And so I went and I argued it, and then we had some kind of reception afterwards, and several of the staff attorneys came up to us and said I had the best argument. And so he was like, "You paid them to do that?" And I'm like, "Oh, you got me. You got me."
He didn't believe in you.
So I've always been very fortunate. I always like appellate arguments. So I've always kind of liked the legal arguments. And so there was a bail bondsman that had some default judgments, and they said, "Who do you hire to do that?" And to set those aside, they said, "You need an appellate attorney." So that's what started my road representing bail bondsmen. I went in, I was asked to go appear, or just to listen to a case in federal court in Houston, and it was the O'Donnell versus Harris County case, one of the first hearings. And I came out of there very upset and angry and scared, because I thought the judge was applying the law wrong. I thought she was going down the wrong road, and she did not like us. She had swallowed the Kool-Aid, I was afraid. And so I came out of there setting the alarm bells. That case was cited across the country at one point. The problem is I was right. She was wrong. She's been reversed 6, 7, 8 or more times in that case.
Wow.
But they ended up entering into a settlement, which she then put into a consent decree, which they still follow to this day, even though Texas law is changed. So there's a big issue right now about whether that's even, whether it should be dismissed because it's not following Texas law. And so that's kind of what got me down into the road of bail reform.
Right.
I decided that we had to become experts on these issues, because if a federal judge can get it wrong, then anybody can get it wrong. And so I've written articles across the country on bail ever since, and bail reform, what is good bail reform, what is bad bail reform. And most of these soft on crime policies, it just angers me when California does another thing saying this will make us safer by releasing more criminals. No, you've capped off your population for your prisons. The courts have told you can't put any more than that. You won't build any additional space. So all you're doing is releasing criminals. And like the Supreme Court of the United States said in the dissent, when you release the equivalent of a brigade, of criminals back into the community, what would you expect except you would have more crime? And historically, every time that's happened, that's what you get. But we have these activists pushing these policies, and they'll never admit they're not working. Never. And people ask me, what's the compromise? How can you compromise with a group that will not admit what they're doing is doing damage? I mean, when they're saying that the Harris County model, which the Texas legislature has enacted laws to change because they dislike it so much. But when the activists go to other states and say, this is the gold standard, it works great, this is what you should do for your entire state. And then you go, well, wait a minute. I mean, the Texas legislature hates it. There's reports out there that show it has 75, 83, 86% failure to appear rate. And you're saying this is what you should adopt without even acknowledge any of those things? How can you compromise with these people? You can't, because there is no compromise, because they have an agenda, and they won't tell you what the agenda is. They won't admit when what they're doing is not working. So it's just a fight for what's right for the criminal justice system, and versus, you could say evil, but I would say people that it's a coalition. Some people have good intentions, but some people don't have good intentions. And you go in there, and as crime goes up, then the coalition starts to fray. And that's what we're saying. The coalition is fraying for this reform, and it needs to, because it's not sustainable.
And does your wife also work, I'm curious, in the same area as you?
No, I don't do very much federal work, especially for federal criminal case. I don't do any. But my wife has been a staff attorney for a federal magistrate judge since she moved to Tyler in the 1990s. We got married in 1996. We had our first daughter in 99, and she's getting married in 2 months from today.
Oh,
so,
wow. Congrats. Congrats, but also I'm sad for you. I know as a dad, that's got to be a little hard.
No, I'm excited. We like the young man, and then our youngest is a junior in college, so we're just rocking and rolling.
And this is just me being curious, with your wife being an attorney, what are arguments like between the two of you? I mean,
I learned very early in our marriage that I should not be citing case law to my wife in bed. And there would be a lot of people who say, hey, you don't have to tell me that. I knew that, and implicit, but not me. I had to learn it the hard way, that you don't cite case law to your wife in bed. But other than that, it's nice, because, she's a lot smarter than me. And so I can't pull anything over her. And I like that. But I also like it because she'll know when I'm doing something, and she'll call me on it. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. And you know it. I want you to know it. So it's a lot of fun. Awesome. It can be a lot of fun. She would say, and she has said for a long time, that she has 3 children and I'm the youngest, and I will stay the youngest probably for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. But I mean, I want to thank you so much for your time. And this is a lot. And I think a lot of people need to understand this a little bit more. Sometimes people don't even really understand what they're voting for, and maybe if, we had more podcasts like this prior to the voting,
yes.
Maybe people would have understood a little bit more about what they were voting for or against. So,
yes. And, that was one of the things I said before the last election. We need people to vote on law and order candidates. So set aside identity politics, set aside R&D, vote on law and order candidates. And right before the last national election, you had a lot of politicians start hiding what they believed, because they knew that if they said they were soft on crime, they would get pummeled. We need one more election where we vote law and order, and then both parties, we've got one wayward party. It will revert back to its law and order history. Until that happens, I mean, look at what happened in Virginia. You have a candidate for governor who ran as a moderate, and she swore she was proposing moderate policies, and she got elected, and she's immediately reverted to the far left, and she's governing from the far left. And it's hurting her favorabilities. It's tanking, and it's hurting so much that her national party people are turning against her, because they're seeing that it's going to hurt. It's now hurting them. And so you're going to get activists are going to lead you down this trail, and they're going to allow you to cut your complete neck off because they won't agree the policies are not working. And so that's what you're there for, whether you know it or not. You're there for the activists to push you off the cliff, and they're hoping to push the political agenda to the left before the public discovers what they've talked you into. And she's going to suffer the consequences for it. She probably is going to turn up to be one of the least effective politicians in her state in a long, long history, because I don't think that they're going to stay in power in the legislature very long as a result of it, and may even lose the redistricting fight they're having because of it.
Wow. God, you know so much about everything. Seriously. I'm like learning so much. But yeah, thank you so much for your time on this, like spending time with us to explain everything. This was amazing. And I'm sure we're going to get a great reception from this because people didn't really know about this. So.
Well, I appreciate it. If people want to know more information about me or my group, they can go to pbtx.com, which is the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. So pbtx.com. We have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice stories, but we have our own podcast. There's a menu, a link on the menu, or you can just go to thebellpost.com, and we talk only criminal justice issues, what works, what doesn't work. And you want to know what the New Jersey plan is? We've got a podcast on it. You want to know about defunding the police? What would happen? We'll take you to the studies that show your murder rate will immediately go up. And who gets affected the most when your murder rate goes up is black males. And you won't hear that from all the politicians saying we got to defund the police and we'll be safer.
Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
It was great chatting with you.
Bye.
Until next time, Bandera. Thank you.